In the previous part, we learned about the bare bones of the conversation device. Most importantly, how a conversation bank is composed of speech nodes that create text that a player can read, response nodes to create choice in conversation, and most importantly, conversation events that can be used by other devices to trigger an event or action. In this part, we'll be focusing on just that. We'll learn how to use Verse to make an NPC subscribe to these conversation events and trigger unique actions based on the event number that's spit out by the device. The unique actions being opening one door or the other. We'll stick to the theme of keeping things simple, so we won't be going over how you can keep track of the number of conversations you've had with an NPC or anything like that in this part. Let's get started by pulling an NPC onto the scene like so. You can position the conversation device above the NPC so that the gatekeeper speaker name hovers above the NPC. First order of business when it comes to the NPC is assigning it a character definition. The three main properties of your NPC that the character definition allows you to set are the character type, its behavior, and what it looks like. For character type, we'll be using Verse, so go ahead and select Custom. For behavior, this is where we attach the Verse script. However, pro tip, don't select Verse here just yet. I believe it's a bug with UEFN, but references you make to other devices here don't work for some reason. Instead, I'll show you how to attach the script to the NPC from the UEFN editor. For now, I'll go ahead and select the skin of my NPC. With that, I can close the window and set it as the NPC's character definition in the details panel. Above the character definition, we see the behavior script override option. This is where we'll be putting our script instead, but we don't have a script just yet. Before we do that though, I'm going to place one lock device on each of these doors. The way that these lock devices work is that they need to be in the vicinity of the thing you're trying to lock/unlock. So I'll place it right on top. Alright, now to the fun part. Let's start writing some Verse code. You can have access to all of your Verse files in the Verse Explorer, which you can open under Verse Explorer. And to make a new Verse file, right-click on Content and Create New Verse File. The way I think of an NPC is that it's exactly like a custom Verse device, and then some, with extra capabilities. These extra capabilities include making it go places, or behaving as an enemy, such as a final boss in a level, or act like wildlife, and so much more. But at the base, it can do everything a custom Verse device can do, which is writing gameplay mechanics. So just keep that in mind. An NPC is a custom Verse device with a character skin. I want to start with pretty much a blank slate, so I'll choose the basic NPC template. The file will appear in your Verse Explorer. Double-click on that and it'll open up Visual Studio Code. Right, what you're looking at right now is a Verse class. The first two lines import libraries that contain functions that we can use, functions that were written by other people so that our lives are made easier. The AI library is particularly important because it gives us a way to execute functions that will affect the behavior of our NPC. If you want to make your NPC move to a certain location, for instance, you'll use functions that already come with this library. From line 4, we see the declaration of our class NPC Room 1. Think of a class as a template that describes a thing. In our case, this thing we'll be describing is our NPC. So that's our thing, or in programming, we refer to them as objects. So classes describe objects. What goes into this description or template, you ask? Every object will have what's called functions and attributes. For instance, let's imagine we're writing a class for a ball. So this ball is our object. The ball can have attributes such as color, size, material, what have you, that describes the ball. But the ball will also have the ability to bounce. Bounce in this case is a function that the ball can carry out. And the bounce function is affected by the material of the ball. So we're starting to see now that functions can make use of certain properties of a class. The purpose of writing a class is so that you don't have to write the same piece of code over and over for objects that all fall under the same category or class. Instead, for two different balls that have different colors and materials, you can just tweak the properties and now you get two different ball objects without having to write code 2 times over. The same principle applies here. We're writing a class for this NPC, and the same verse code can be applied to a different NPC that has similar properties. Okay, hopefully that was clear. Back to Visual Studio Code. This is how the structure of classes work in Verse. You have attributes or variables and references and such on top, and functions below them. The first attribute this NPC will have is its reference to the conversation device. So attributes can be thought of as variables that belong to any type. It can be an integer, it can be a string, or it can be an object of another class. In our case, this attribute is a reference or an object of the conversation device class. The editable decorator here allows you to edit the value of a variable or attribute in the UEFN editor. And all Fortnite devices are referenced within the editors, so if you're going to be making a reference to them in Verse, they'll require the editable decorator. Here, myCon device is the variable that will hold the reference to the conversation device. You can name it whatever you want. This right here refers to the kind of value that this variable will hold. In this case, it can hold anything that looks like a conversation device. Finally, this third part refers to the value of our variable. In our case, we're making an object of the class conversation device. So there is no value per se. We're asking Verse to retrieve an object of the type or of the class conversation device. To make things a little bit more clear, let's say instead of writing a variable or an attribute that is referencing a Fortnite device, we were to write a variable of the type int. In that case, this is what it would look like. We have variable name, the type of variable it is, which is int, and the value it holds. We have this red squiggly line because right now we're using classes like conversation device that belong to a library that we haven't imported yet. All Fortnite device classes are defined in a library called devices, which we need to import at the top like so. If you're wondering how I know what the name of the particular class for conversation device is, you can go to the documentation and under Verse, search for conversation device, and you will see the documentation for this particular class and all the functions that the conversation device comes with. I'll come back to this page in a little bit, but now you know how to look for class names of other Fortnite devices. Let's do this again, but for the lock device. We'll search for lock device, copy the name of the class, and make references to both lock devices we have in our scene. We'll call our object variable doorlock1 and describe its type as lock device, and assign it to the default value of lock device that tells UEFN we'll be connecting a lock device later. And we do the same for doorlock2. We're done writing our attributes. Now we move on to functions that this NPC class can carry out. By default, Verse populates your classes with the onBegin and onEnd function. As the name suggests, the onBegin function is called the moment your game session begins, and onEnd is called at the end. What we want our NPC to do right from the start is to pay attention to any conversation events that's sent out by our conversation device. It doesn't matter if the NPC is in the middle of doing something. If a conversation event occurs during the game, then the NPC should know about it and deal with it the way it's programmed to. This kind of background awareness of events occurring is made possible by the suspense specifier. An in-depth explanation of suspense is outside the scope of this video, but all you need to know for now is that every time a conversation event is sped out by the conversation device, the NPC will know about it. The way you can extend this awareness to your NPC is by accessing the conversation device class that we called myConDevice, then subscribing to the onConversation event data member of this class. This is the syntax for subscribing to events. You can read more about the onConversation event data member and the documentation for the conversation device. But now what? What do we do about the conversation event? Well, we want to throw Verse to a function that can deal with it. This function doesn't exist yet, but we can place the name of the function here. We'll call it conversation event respond, or whatever you prefer. Next, we write the code for this function. This part can get a little tricky. When onConversation event is triggered, the conversation device sends back two pieces of information: who triggered the event, aka the player, and the event number that was assigned to the choice in the conversation bank. Whatever function we write has to be able to accept both pieces of information. In programming, we call them parameters of a function. Again, the only way to know about all of this is by going through the documentation. But even with the documentation, it's not super clear what the syntax is supposed to look like, or what order we accept this information. So the way I figured that out is by first starting off by writing my function name, placing nothing inside the parentheses where the parameters go, because technically I don't know what's supposed to go in there. Proceeding to write void, which essentially means that my function will return nothing, and then writing some dummy code in my function block to complete my function definition. And bam, when I hover over the red line, I see that it expects me to account for the two parameters that will be sent back. Now I know what the order of the parameters are. So I can go inside the parentheses, declare variables of the type agent and int. You can call these variables whatever you want, by the way. So yeah, this comes with some practice between writing verse code and reading the documentation. Anyway, inside the function, we'll write a print statement to check if everything is working. We don't need the function to do anything yet, we just need to make sure that this function is being called at all. So we print the statement, and during testing, we'll check the log to see if it's been printed. I'll launch a session, make a choice, which means a conversation event has occurred, and if everything's set up correctly, we'll see the print statement in the log. From here, everything will be much simpler. We can make use of the event number to selectively open doors. If event number is 1, it means that the player's chosen science and we open door 1. If event number is 2, then we open door 2. Open door 1 and door 2 are custom functions I'll define below. Even though it's only one line of code to open a door, I wanted to use a custom function because I can use it later should I decide to do other things, such as play a unique animation on the NPC character, depending on the choice. I'll start by defining the function with its name, nothing in the parameters, void equals to signify what the function will return. Inside the function body, I'll use the doorlock class and access its open function. But the documentation says here that the open function needs to know who's opening the door. In our case, it's the player, aka the agent. So we need to pass agent in here, which means it'll need to get it from here, and where the function is first called, it'll need to be passed in from here. Same thing for open door 2. Finally, let's build our verse code, save everything, and launch session. Choose science or philosophy, and in the logs, we find that it's been printed, and we can now proceed to the next room. I hope that was clear. I know for those that are just starting out with programming in verse, there was maybe a little bit packed in here, but also maybe some nifty tricks on how to work with verse. But hopefully it was fun. In the next part, we'll cover how an NPC can make use of two conversation devices and choose between them depending on the number of conversations we've had with the NPC. Thank you for watching.